4 years after my husband passed, a woman I'd never met called my house at 7:30 in the morning and said, "Mrs. Hartwell, I'm an attorney. I have something that belonged to your husband, and I need you to come to Savannah today. Please don't tell your daughter or your son-in-law about this call. Trust me on that." I stood there in my kitchen in my robe, holding the phone, watching the steam curl up from my coffee, and I couldn't make my mouth work. My name is Colette Hartwell. I'm 68 years old, and I've lived in the same little blue house on Magnolia Avenue in Brunswick, Georgia, for 41 years. My husband Edmund and I bought it the year our daughter Vivian was born. He was a high school history teacher, the kind of man who wore the same pair of brown loafers for 15 years and refused to throw them away, even when the soles started flapping. He passed from a stroke on a Sunday morning 4 years ago. He was in the garden, kneeling by his tomato plants, and he just slumped forward like a man taking a nap. That was Edmund. Even his death was quiet. I grieved hard that first year. The second year, I learned how to be alone. The third year, I started feeling like myself again, going to my Wednesday quilting circle, walking the dog, calling Vivian every Sunday. I thought I was finished with surprises. Then this woman called me. "My name is Imani Calloway," she said. "I work with Bordeaux and Finch in Savannah. Your husband had an arrangement with our senior partner before he passed. I'm sorry to be calling you so early, Mrs. Hartwell, but circumstances have made this urgent. Can you come today?" Alone? I asked her what this was about. She said she couldn't discuss it on the phone. I asked her why she didn't want me to tell my family. She paused for a long time, and then she said, "Because of what I've learned in the last 48 hours. Please, just come." I don't know why I agreed. Maybe because she sounded like she was trying not to cry. Maybe because Edmund had always told me to trust my gut. I told her I'd be there by 11. I dressed carefully. I don't know why. I put on the navy slacks and the cream blouse Vivian gave me for my last birthday, and I sat in my car in the driveway for 10 minutes before I could turn the key. The drive to Savannah is about an hour and a half if you don't hit traffic. I hit traffic. I had 2 hours to think, and by the time I crossed the bridge into the city, my hands were shaking. The office was on Drayton Street in one of those old brick buildings with the wrought iron balconies. Imani Calloway met me at the elevator. She was younger than I expected, maybe 40, tall, with kind eyes and a serious mouth. She walked me past the reception desk, straight back to a small conference room with the blinds drawn. She set a folder on the table between us, and on top of the folder was an envelope, cream-colored, Edmund's handwriting on the front, for Colette, to be opened only if my will is contested or if anyone challenges what I have left her. I sat down hard. I think I made a sound. She slid a glass of water toward me and waited. "Mrs. Hartwell," she said gently, "2 weeks ago our firm was served papers. Your daughter Vivienne and your son-in-law Garrett Pemberton have filed a petition in probate court contesting your husband's will. They're alleging that you exercised undue influence over Edmund in his final years and that he was not of sound mind when he made his final estate decisions. They're asking the court to set aside the will and redistribute the assets." I stared at her. I think I said her name wrong. I said something like, "Vivienne wouldn't." And then I said it again. "Vivienne wouldn't do that." "There's more," she said. "They filed for emergency review of all financial transactions you and your husband made in the last 7 years. They're claiming you may have hidden assets." I felt like the room was tilting. Vivienne is my only child. She's 42 years old. I held her in my arms 10 minutes after she was born. I drove her to ballet lessons for 9 years. I sat in a hospital chair for 6 days when she had her appendix out at 16. She lives 20 minutes from me. She comes for dinner on Tuesdays. She brought me a casserole the week after Edmund died and stayed 3 nights so I wouldn't be alone. "There has to be a mistake," I said. "I wish there was," Imani said. "Mrs. Hartwell, your husband came to our senior partner, Mr. Bordeaux, 2.5 years before he passed. He set up a private trust. He put a substantial portion of his savings and the proceeds from selling his mother's house in Charleston into that trust. The trust is in your name only. The total value is just over $900,000. I shook my head. Edmund didn't have that kind of money. We were school teacher money. We were carefully money. His mother's house sold for 640,000. He never told you that, did he? He told you it sold for 200. He put the difference into the trust. He also added his pension distributions for the last 5 years of his life. He told Mr. Bordeaux he wanted you to have a cushion in case something happened that he was afraid was going to happen. I started to cry. Right there in front of this woman I'd never met. She handed me a tissue. She didn't rush me. He left a letter, she said. He asked us to give it to you only if this exact thing happened. I'm so sorry. I opened the envelope with shaking hands. Edmund's handwriting was harder to read than I remembered. He had a tremor at the end. I had forgotten that. My Letty, it began. He'd called me Letty since the day we met. If you're reading this, then the thing I prayed wouldn't happen has happened. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I should have told you while I was still here. I was a coward. I kept thinking I was wrong about him. You were always blind where Garrett was concerned. You wanted Vivienne to be happy so badly that you didn't see what I saw. He's been working on her, Letty, for years. Slowly. The way water gets into a basement. I tried to tell her once, 2 summers before I got sick, and she didn't speak to me for a month. I couldn't lose her. I couldn't risk you losing her. So I kept quiet and I made arrangements. The trust is yours, only yours. Use it however you need to. Hire the best lawyer you can find. Don't let them push you out of our house. Don't let them make you doubt yourself. I watched you raise our daughter. I watched you sit up nights with her when she was sick. I watched you put yourself last for 40 years. You don't owe them the life we built. You earned it. Vivienne is a good girl, Letty. She is. But she married a man who sees money the way a hungry dog sees meat, and she has let him in too far. I hope I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, you'll never read this letter. But if I'm right, you fight. You hear me? You fight. I love you. I have loved you since the day you walked into my classroom looking for the office. I will love you when this letter is dust. Always yours, Edmund. I couldn't read it again right away. I just held it. Imani sat across from me and waited, and I will never forget her for that. She didn't fill the silence. She didn't pat my hand. She let me sit with my husband's voice for as long as I needed. When I could finally speak, I said, "What do they want?" She pulled out a document. They're asking the court to award them 70% of the estate, citing their claim that you manipulated your husband into reducing what should have been their natural inheritance. They're also asking the court to require you to sell the house and split the proceeds. The petition was filed by Garrett's brother's law firm in Atlanta. It's aggressive. My house? Your house? The savings, the life insurance proceeds, everything. They don't know about the trust yet. That's the only thing they don't know about. I sat back. I looked at the ceiling. There was a water stain shaped like a question mark up in the corner. I remember staring at it and thinking very clearly, all right. I had grieved my husband. I had grieved my marriage. I had not yet grieved my daughter, but I was about to. Tell me what to do, I said. Imani walked me through it carefully. She and her senior partner had been Edmund's choice, and they were going to be mine. We would file a response to the petition. We would request a full discovery of Vivienne and Garrett's communications and finances. We would not mention the trust unless and until we needed it. We would build a case showing that Edmund had been entirely competent, that our marriage had been long and loving, and that this petition was being driven by greed and not by any genuine concern about my husband's mental state. I need you to be ready, she said. When they realize you're fighting, they're going to try to make this ugly. They're going to call old friends. They're going to dig up anything they can. They might try to come to your house. Let them come, I said. I drove home in a kind of daze. I called Vivienne that night, just to hear her voice. I wanted to know if she sounded different. She did. There was a tightness to her, a brightness she was forcing. She asked how I was, and I said, fine. She asked what I'd done that day, and I said I'd gone for a walk. I asked how Garrett was. There was the smallest pause before she said, he's good. Busy. I knew. Right then, I knew. The next 2 weeks were the strangest of my life. I went to my quilting circle. I walked the dog. I made meatloaf on Tuesday because that was the night Vivienne usually came over, and she came and she ate it, and she sat at my table and laughed at my stories and asked if I needed help with anything around the house. And the whole time I knew she had signed her name to a piece of paper saying her father was not in his right mind when he died. Garrett came with her that Tuesday. He almost never came on Tuesdays. He sat in Edmund's chair, which I hated, and he asked me a lot of casual-sounding questions. Did I ever think about downsizing? Wouldn't a condo be easier? Had I considered that maintaining the house alone might be too much? He smiled the whole time. Vivienne wouldn't meet my eyes. After they left, I sat at the kitchen table and I let myself cry, and then I called Imani's cell phone, which she had told me to use any time, and I said, "He's after the house. He's been after it for a while." "I think I just realized," she said. "Don't tip your hand. Keep being normal. We'll be ready." 2 days later, the letter came. Certified mail, signature required. My own daughter was suing me. I held that envelope in my hand on my front porch and I thought about every birthday cake I had ever baked her. The strawberry one when she turned 7. The unicorn one when she was 9. The boxed chocolate one she requested every year from 12 to 17. Imani filed our response. She also filed for sanctions, arguing that the petition was frivolous, and she filed a discovery request for every email, text message, and bank statement Garrett and Vivienne had exchanged in the last 5 years. The first crack came 2 weeks after that. Imani called me on a Tuesday morning. "Mrs. Hartwell, you need to sit down." I sat down. "Garrett Pemberton has been in serious financial trouble for almost 4 years. His business has been bleeding money since the year before your husband died. He's borrowed against his house twice. He has nearly $400,000 in personal debt. We've also found a series of emails between him and his brother, the attorney, dating back 2 years, discussing strategies for, and I'm quoting here, getting Vivienne to see reason about her mother's situation." I closed my eyes. 2 years, I said. 2 years. They've been planning this since before your husband even died. There's an email from Garrett's brother dated about 8 months before your husband's stroke that says, and again I'm quoting, "When the old man finally goes, we'll have a window. Vivi adores her mother, but she'll listen to you. Just be patient." I had to put the phone down for a minute. I sat in Edmund's chair, the one Garrett had been in, and I thought about that man calling my husband, the old man, and waiting for him to die. "There's more," Imani said when I picked the phone back up. "Garrett has also been having an affair with his bookkeeper. Has been for about 18 months. Vivienne does not know. We have proof. I'm not telling you to use this, Mrs. Hartwell. I'm telling you so you can decide if you want to use it." I thought about it for 3 days. I prayed about it, which I haven't done in a long time. And then I called Imani back and I said, "Hold on to it. Don't use it yet. I want her to find it on her own, if she's going to find it." The first hearing was set for early November. The week before, on a Sunday afternoon, I was raking leaves in the front yard when Vivienne and Garrett pulled up. They got out of the car together and walked up the path with the kind of soft, sad expressions you put on when you've practiced them in a mirror. "Mama," Vivienne said, and her voice broke a little. "Can we come inside? We need to talk." I leaned on my rake. "About the lawsuit." She flinched. Garrett didn't. "Mrs. Hartwell," he said in that warm tone he used when he wanted something, "we don't want this to go to court. None of us want that. We came here today to make peace. Vivi is sick over this. We've been talking, and we want to offer you a path forward where everyone gets what they need." "Inside, Mama, please," Vivienne said. I let them in. I sat them at the kitchen table. I did not offer them coffee. Edmund would have offered them coffee. I am not Edmund. Garrett did most of the talking. He had a folder. He always has a folder. He laid out his proposal like a man selling a timeshare. I would keep the house, but only for my lifetime, and then it would pass to Vivienne. I would receive a monthly allowance from the estate to ensure your security, Colette. The bulk of the savings, life insurance, and any other assets would be placed into a family trust managed by Vivienne and Garrett to protect your interests. In exchange, the lawsuit would be dropped. He smiled at me the whole time. He had a little bit of food in his teeth. "And if I don't agree?" I asked. His smile didn't change. "Then we go to court, Colette, and that will be very hard on Vivi, and I'm afraid that some things will have to come out in court that won't reflect well on you. We've been talking to some of Edmund's old colleagues. There are some questions about your behavior in his last year, about medications, about isolation." Vivian went pale. I watched her face. She had not known he was going to say that. "What medications, Garrett?" I said quietly. "The court will look into it," he said. "What medications would those be? Be specific. Colette, be reasonable." "Vivienne," I said, look at me, baby." She looked up, her eyes were wet. "Did you tell him I gave your father something?" "No, Mama, I never." "Did you ever in your life see anything that made you think I hurt your father in any way?" "No," she whispered. "Then why are you sitting at my kitchen table?" She started to cry. Garrett put his hand on her back, and I watched her flinch, just barely, the way you'd flinch from a hot pan. "I think you should both leave," I said. "Colette, you're being— Get out of my house, Garrett. I won't say it again." He stood up slowly. He took the folder. At the door, he turned back and said, "You're going to regret this. I'm telling you that as someone who cares about you, the case we have is stronger than you realize." "I have a letter from my husband," I said, "written in his own hand, telling me exactly who you are and exactly what you do. I think you'll find that's stronger than anything you have." His face changed. Just for a second, I saw the man behind the smile, and he was not a kind man. They left. I locked the door behind them. I sat down on the floor in the front hall, and I cried until I couldn't cry anymore. Then I got up, washed my face, and called Imani. "They came," I said. "He threatened me. He said something about medications. He's lying about Edmund's last year." "Good," she said. "Good. Mrs. Hartwell, that's intimidation of a represented party. We can use that." Did anyone else see them? My neighbor Clea was on her porch. She saw them come and go. Perfect. Get a written statement from her this week. The hearing happened, and then there was a second hearing, and then a third, because Garrett's brother kept filing motions trying to delay. We turned over our discovery. They turned over theirs badly with things missing until the judge ordered them to do it again. The emails came out. The financial records came out. The pattern of debt came out. And then, 2 weeks before the trial was set to begin, Vivienne called me. It was a Thursday afternoon. I was at the sink washing a coffee cup. I almost let it go to voicemail. "Mama," she said, and her voice was different. It wasn't the bright voice. It wasn't the rehearsed voice. It was the small voice she used to use when she was a little girl and had done something wrong. "Mama, I need to tell you something. I need to tell you a lot of things. Can I come over? By myself?" She came that night. She sat at the kitchen table where she had sat 100,000 times in her life, and she put her face in her hands. "He's been having an affair," she said. "I found out yesterday. I went to his office to bring him lunch, and there was a woman there, and I knew. I just knew. Mama, I confronted him last night, and he didn't even deny it for very long. He told me I should be grateful he was still trying to keep our family together. He said I should be grateful, Mama. I didn't say anything. I put my hand on her back. I read the emails," she said. "The ones from his brother. The ones from before Daddy died. I made him show them to me. Mama, they were planning this when Daddy was still alive. I was so angry at Daddy for years for being distant with Garrett, and the whole time it was because Daddy could see what I couldn't see. I sued you. I sued my own mother. Mama, what did I do? What did I do?" She cried for a long time. I cried too. I didn't pretend it didn't hurt. I told her that what she'd done had broken something I wasn't sure I could fix in a day or a week or a month. I told her I loved her and that those two things were both true. I told her about her father's letter. I read it to her. She cried harder. "He knew," she kept saying. "Daddy knew. Daddy knew," I said, "and he loved you anyway. And he loved me enough to make sure I'd be safe." She withdrew from the lawsuit the next morning. Garrett was furious. He tried to keep the case alive on his own, but without her as a co-petitioner, his standing collapsed. Imani moved for sanctions. The judge granted them. Garrett was personally ordered to pay $62,000 in legal fees within 90 days, and his brother's firm was reported to the state bar for filing claims they knew or should have known were false. The brother lost his partnership. Vivian filed for divorce on a Monday. She moved into my guest room 2 days later with 3 suitcases and the dog. She slept for 16 hours straight that first night. I made her oatmeal in the morning, the way I used to when she was a child. She ate it without speaking. We didn't fix it overnight. I want to be honest about that. There were weeks when I looked at her and I felt a flash of that old hurt. There were nights when she cried herself to sleep on the other side of the wall, and I made myself stay in my bed instead of going to her, because some things you have to feel all the way through. We started seeing a counselor together, a woman named Meadow Tully, who had silver hair and laughed easily and made us both do hard work. The divorce got ugly. Garrett tried to take the house Vivienne and he had owned together. The bookkeeper got pregnant. He lost most of his clients when word got around about his behavior in court. The $62,000 came out of his retirement, which he'd been counting on, and he had to file a kind of bankruptcy to manage what was left of his debts. I'm told he moved to Birmingham. I never used the affair against him in public. I didn't have to. Things have a way of finding their level. 6 months after Vivian moved in, she got a job at the Historical Society in Brunswick, doing the kind of archival work she'd loved before she met Garrett and let him talk her out of it. She bought a little bungalow 3 blocks from me and painted the front door yellow. She comes for dinner on Tuesdays. We are careful with each other. We are honest with each other in a way we never were before. The careful and the honest are both new, and they're both worth having. A year after the case ended, on what would have been Edmund's 73rd birthday, I drove to the cemetery and sat on the bench by his grave and read his letter aloud to him. I told him he'd been right. I told him he'd been right. I told him I'd fought the way he'd asked me to. I told him that Vivienne had come back, the way I think he'd hoped she would. I told him I missed him in a way that was no longer a wound, but more like a long, low note that played underneath everything. I used some of the trust to take Vivienne to Ireland that fall. She'd wanted to go since she was 19. We rented a car and got lost in Connemara and ate too much brown bread and laughed until our stomachs hurt. I took some more of it and set up a scholarship at Edmund's old high school in his name for kids who wanted to be teachers. The rest sits where it is, and I sleep well. I'll tell you what I learned, because I think someone listening might need it. I learned that the people you love can hurt you in ways you cannot imagine, and you can survive it. I learned that a quiet man who pays attention can save your life from beyond the grave. I learned that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone you love is refuse to let them rob you, because if they get away with it, they become a person you can't love anymore, and that costs everyone too much. I learned that the day a stranger calls you out of the blue and asks you to come alone, sometimes the best thing you can do is go. I'm 68 years old. I have a yellow house 3 blocks from my daughter and a dog who doesn't listen and a quilting circle that meets on Wednesdays. I have a husband in the ground who loved me enough to see what I couldn't see. I have a daughter who came home. If you're listening to this and you're sitting at your kitchen table wondering whether to fight, I want you to hear me. You fight. You hear me. You fight. Thank you for listening tonight. I'd love to know what city you're listening from, and if you've ever had to stand your ground against someone you love, tell me about it in the comments. I read everyone. Be well, friends. Take care of each other, and trust your gut. It knows things you don't. I've been turning this story over in my head for a long time now, and I think the thing that comes back to me most often is how quietly it all started. Not with a fight, not with a big betrayal you could see coming. It started with my son-in-law Garrett sitting in my husband's chair on a Tuesday night, asking soft questions about whether the house was getting to be too much for me. That was the seed. Everything that came after grew from that seed, slowly, the way Edmund used to say, water gets into a basement. I think people want to believe that bad things announce themselves. They don't. People who mean to take from you almost never look like takers at the door. Garrett brought wine, he laughed at my jokes, he helped me carry groceries, and the whole time he was building a case against me in his head and pulling my daughter along with him, one careful conversation at a time. The lesson I learned, the hard way, is that small wrongs, left alone, don't stay small. They compound. A little flinch in your gut that you ignore at Christmas becomes a lawsuit by November. If something feels off in someone you love, it is off. You don't have to act on it that day, but you don't get to pretend you didn't feel it either. The other thing I want to say, and I want to say it clearly, is that fighting back is not the same as being cruel. For most of my life, I confused those two things. I thought a good woman absorbed, a good mother forgave first and asked questions later. A good wife kept the peace. Edmund knew better than I did. He knew that letting people take from you doesn't make them better people. It makes them worse. It teaches them that your love has no edges. The kindest thing I ever did for Vivienne in the end was refuse to let her husband rob me. Because if I'd let him, she would have grown into a woman who'd helped her husband rob her mother, and she could never have come home from that. By standing my ground, I left her a door she could walk back through. She walked through it. I'm not a young woman. I don't have a lot of years left to spend on the wrong things. What I've learned is that real strength is quiet. The way Edmund was quiet. It's writing the letter 2 years before you need it. It's calling the right lawyer. It's staying at your own kitchen table when somebody bigger and louder than you is trying to push you out of it. And real wisdom, I think, is being honest about who people are, even when it costs you. Especially then. If you take anything from my story, take this: trust your gut. Protect what you've built. Love your people enough to tell them the truth, and love yourself enough to fight for the life you earned. You don't have to be loud about it. You just have to refuse to move.